The world held its breath when NASA confirmed the distressing news. Astronaut Sunita Williams was stranded in space. A routine mission had turned into a nightmare when an unexpected propulsion system failure left her and her small crew aboard the ISS unable to return home. NASA engineers worked tirelessly alongside international space agencies to develop a safe return plan. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and soon, Sunita's voice became the symbol of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable human spirit. Her video messages from space inspired millions. "The Earth looks so beautiful from here," she once said, gazing down at the swirling blues and greens of the planet she called home. "But no matter how breathtaking this view is, home is where the heart belongs. And my heart is down there with all of you." Through all the hardships, Sunita kept her crew's morale high. She exercised daily, floated around with her signature humor, and even found moments to admire the quiet serenity of space. But deep down, she missed the feeling of Earth, the smell of fresh rain, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the simple joy of hugging a loved one. Finally, after 8 agonizing months, a daring rescue mission brought Sunita and her team home. As she took her first steps back on solid ground, the world watched in awe. She was weaker than before, her muscles struggling against gravity after so long in microgravity, but her spirit remained unshaken. Then came the moment that would forever be remembered, the speech that left millions in tears. The air was thick with anticipation as the world awaited Sunita Williams' first public address. The NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston was packed with journalists, scientists, and families. Millions more tuned in live across the globe, anxious to hear from the woman who had faced the endless silence of space and returned with a story that would touch hearts forever. Sunita, dressed in her navy blue NASA flight suit, walked slowly onto the stage. There was a fragile grace to her movements, evidence of the toll that months in zero gravity had taken on her body. But the moment she raised her head, her warm smile and bright eyes reassured everyone. Sunita Williams had returned, not just as an astronaut, but as a symbol of hope. The applause was thunderous, stretching on for what felt like an eternity. Tears glistened in the eyes of her colleagues and loved ones. She placed a hand over her heart and waited for the room to settle before stepping up to the podium. Her voice trembled slightly at first, heavy with emotion. "I don't know if words are enough to capture what I've been through," she began. "But I'm going to try. Because if there's one thing I've learned out there, it's that every single moment on Earth is precious." A hush fell over the crowd. She spoke of the loneliness, of watching the Earth spin below her, knowing she couldn't return. There were days when fear crept into her thoughts. Fear that something might go wrong, that she might never again feel the ground beneath her feet. But in those moments, she clung to hope. "Hope," she said softly, "is what kept me alive, and that hope came from all of you. I knew people were working tirelessly, day and night, to bring us home. I knew that my family, my friends, you were all praying, waiting, believing in us. I wasn't alone. I never was." The room was silent, except for the occasional sound of someone quietly wiping away tears. She described how, every night before bed, she would float to the cupola window, the observatory of the International Space Station, and gaze at the Earth below. It became a ritual. She watched storms brewing over oceans, the twinkling lights of cities, and the golden sunrise cresting over the planet's edge. "The Earth looks so peaceful from up there," she whispered. "But I knew that every light I saw represented a life. Someone's laughter, someone's pain, someone's dreams. And I missed it. I missed all of it so much." Her voice broke for a moment, and she paused to gather herself. When you're floating in the void, it's easy to forget how miraculous life truly is. "I promised myself that if I ever made it home, I wouldn't take a single breath for granted again." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. "I didn't survive because I'm strong," she continued. "I survived because love is stronger than any darkness, stronger than fear, and it's the only thing that follows you, even in the loneliest corners of the universe." At that moment, many in the audience could no longer hold back their emotions. Reporters who had covered countless stories were visibly moved. Even the most stoic engineers who had worked on her rescue wiped away tears as her words sank in. And then Sunita did something that no one expected. She stepped back from the podium, took a slow, careful breath, and said, "I want to thank a few special people because without them, I wouldn't be standing here today." Sunita Williams turned slightly, her gaze sweeping the room. Her smile softened as she focused on a group sitting in the front row, the mission control engineers who had worked tirelessly to bring her home. To the men and women of NASA's mission control, she began, her voice steady but filled with deep gratitude. "I know you don't seek the spotlight. Most people will never know your names. But I do. I know every voice that came through my headset during those long months. I know every heart that beat alongside mine when things got tough. And I owe my life to you." The camera panned to the engineers, several of whom were openly emotional. One young woman, no older than 30, wiped tears from her cheeks, knowing that every sleepless night, every anxious hour spent calculating the return trajectory had been worth it. "I remember one night," Sunita continued, her tone more reflective. "There was a problem with the oxygen recycling system. I was floating alone in the lab module, scared out of my mind. And then I heard a voice, 'Sunita, we've got you.' I can't tell you how much those words meant. Just knowing I wasn't alone, it kept me going." A ripple of sniffles echoed through the crowd. Then Sunita's eyes shifted to a different section of the audience, the astronauts who had come before her. She smiled a little wider as she acknowledged their courage. "To those who paved the way," she said, "I stand on the shoulders of giants. Sally Ride, Kalpana Chawla, Mae Jemison. My journey would never have been possible without the trailblazers who dared to dream of touching the stars. You inspired a little girl from Ohio to believe that space wasn't just for others, it was for all of us." A gentle wave of applause rose as the audience recognized the legacy of the women who had broken barriers before her. Sunita took a deep breath, her expression turning more tender. "And to my family," her voice faltered, emotion swelling in her chest. "I don't have words strong enough to thank you. My parents taught me that no dream is too big if you're willing to work hard. My husband, he held our world together while I was gone. Every day he sent me messages telling me to stay strong. And to my little niece, my star, I promised I'd come home and tell her bedtime stories again. And here I am, sweetheart. I'm home." The camera zoomed in on a small girl sitting in the audience. Her wide, tear-filled eyes sparkled as she held a drawing in her hands, a picture of her and Sunita holding hands under a starry sky. A murmur of emotion passed through the crowd. At that moment, it wasn't just a speech, it was a love letter to the people who never stopped believing she would return. Sunita took a step closer to the microphone, her face resolute. "I may have been the one floating in space, but this was never just my journey. This was a journey we took together. Every person who sent a prayer, a message, or even a simple thought of hope, you were there with me. And I carried you in my heart." The room, filled with some of the world's brightest minds, was silent, humbled by the raw human truth of her words. And then, as if she were speaking directly to the millions watching from their homes, Sunita added softly, "If I've learned anything, it's this: life is fragile, life is precious, and we can never, ever take it for granted." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. We spend so much time looking up at the stars, wondering about what's out there. But the greatest miracle is right here on Earth. The people we love, the simple joys, the kindness we show one another. If you have that, you have everything. A tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, "I missed home, and now that I'm here, I'll never stop being grateful." The crowd erupted into a standing ovation, some cheering while others wiped their eyes. But there was more to her story, something deeper, something that would leave an indelible mark on every heart listening. As the applause gradually faded, Sunita Williams remained at the podium, her fingers gently brushing against its edge. She took a deep breath, a breath she had longed for during those endless months in space. Her expression grew thoughtful as she began to speak again, her words carrying the weight of someone who had touched the infinite and returned with wisdom. "People often ask me," she said softly, "what does space teach you?" And I used to answer with facts, science, physics, engineering. But after being stranded up there, my answer has changed. She looked toward the crowd, her gaze seeming to touch every person in the room. "Space teaches you how small we are, but how powerful our connections can be." Her voice trembled slightly with emotion as she recalled the quietest nights in orbit. "I floated thousands of miles above Earth, and I saw it in a way most people never will. No borders, no countries, just a fragile, glowing world, hanging in the blackness. And I realized, everything that truly matters is down here. Love, kindness, the people we hold close. She paused, her hand pressing against her heart. I wasn't supposed to be gone for so long, she continued. And there were moments, dark moments, when I didn't know if I'd ever make it back. But do you know what pulled me through? She smiled softly through the tears beginning to form again. It was the voices from Earth. Every message I received, every call from Mission Control. It reminded me I wasn't alone. And I made a promise to myself that if I came home, I would cherish every single voice I loved. A hush fell over the crowd again. Sunita's words weren't just for the engineers or the scientists. They were for everyone watching. She was reaching into living rooms, into hearts, reminding people of the most profound truth. We need each other. I know life can feel heavy sometimes, she said, her voice growing stronger. We all get lost in the rush, work, worries, the noise of the world. But if I learned anything while being stranded, it's that life isn't about the big things. It's about the simple moments. Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears as she shared the memory that had kept her going during the darkest days. One night, when I was feeling especially lost, I closed my eyes and thought of home. I thought of my father sitting on our porch, telling me stories about the stars when I was a little girl. I thought of my mother's laughter, my husband's warm embrace, and my niece's tiny hand in mine. And I realized, those moments, they're everything. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she made no effort to hide it. If you have someone you love, tell them. If you miss someone, call them. Don't wait. Don't let life slip by while you chase things that don't matter. Her voice quivered with raw emotion, but her message was clear. Because when you're floating in the endless void of space, you realize that all the success, all the ambition, it means nothing without the people you love. The audience sat in stunned silence, each word settling into their hearts. In a world so often consumed by busyness, Sunita's message was a wake-up call, a reminder to treasure the simple, beautiful things that make life worth living. She shifted her posture slightly, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she tried to lighten the mood. And trust me, she said, chuckling softly, after months of eating freeze-dried food, I'll never take a home-cooked meal for granted again. Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the tension, but the weight of her words still lingered. Then, with quiet sincerity, she added, I also want to say something to the dreamers, the young girls and boys watching this, wondering if they can reach the stars. Her eyes glowed with the fierce determination that had defined her career. Yes, you can, she said firmly. You don't have to come from a perfect place. You don't have to be the smartest or the strongest. All you need is the courage to try and the heart to keep going when things get tough. The applause swelled again, louder and more heartfelt this time. But Sunita wasn't finished yet. There was one final message she needed to share. As the applause faded once more, Sunita Williams took a steadying breath. The weight of her journey, both physical and emotional, seemed to settle on her shoulders, but her voice remained strong, filled with a quiet resolve. Before I left Earth, she said, I thought space would be the ultimate adventure. I believed that nothing could compare to the feeling of floating among the stars. But I was wrong. She smiled softly, a warmth in her expression that reached across the room. The greatest adventure isn't out there, it's right here. It's life itself. It's the people we love, the lives we touch, and the memories we create. I may have seen the universe in all its wonder, but nothing compares to the feeling of being held by someone who loves you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. In that moment, she wasn't just speaking as an astronaut, she was speaking as a human being who had faced the unimaginable and returned with a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. She turned her gaze toward a group of young students sitting near the back of the hall, aspiring scientists and engineers who had been invited to witness her return. Her voice grew softer, more intimate, as if she were speaking directly to them. I know there are young people out there wondering if they can make a difference, she said. And I want you to hear me, yes, you can. The world needs dreamers. It needs people who are brave enough to reach for the impossible. Because when you dream, you don't just change your own life, you change the world around you. A young girl in the audience, no older than 10, clutched a homemade sign that read, Future Astronaut. Her eyes sparkled with awe as she listened to Sunita's words, a spark of possibility igniting in her heart. Sunita's smile widened when she noticed the sign. To every little girl out there, she continued, don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. You are stronger than you know. If you want to touch the stars, go for it. And when you get there, I'll be cheering you on. The room erupted into applause again, but this time there was something more, a sense that her words were planting seeds of hope in everyone who heard them. And then, just when the audience thought her speech was over, Sunita took one last step closer to the microphone. Her face grew serious, her voice soft but unwavering. I made a promise to myself when I was stranded in space, she said quietly. If I ever made it home, I wouldn't waste a single day. I wouldn't let the little things go unnoticed. And I want to ask all of you, what would you do if today was a gift? The question hung in the air, echoing in the hearts of everyone listening. Because it is, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Every sunrise, every hug, every laugh shared with someone you love, it's all a gift. And we don't know how many we'll get. So, please, don't take it for granted. Hold on to the people who matter. Love them fiercely. And never, ever forget how precious this life is. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Even the reporters, seasoned professionals who had covered countless press conferences, sat motionless, deeply moved by the raw honesty of her words. Then, slowly, the audience rose to their feet. The applause began softly, swelling into a thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the very walls. People weren't just clapping, they were celebrating her survival, her courage, and the profound truth she had shared. Tears filled Sunita's eyes as she placed a hand over her heart. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for bringing me home. As the applause continued, the cameras zoomed out, capturing the full scope of the moment. Across the world, millions of viewers sat in their living rooms, wiping tears from their faces, their hearts touched by a speech that had transcended borders and languages. And in the front row, her family stood together, her husband with his arm around their niece, who clutched her, drawing tightly against her chest. In that instant, Sunita Williams wasn't just a hero returning from the stars. She was a reminder to everyone that no matter how far we go, no matter how vast the universe may seem, home will always be where the heart is. And as the lights dimmed and the cameras faded to black, her final words lingered in the hearts of everyone who heard them. Love is the strongest force in the universe. And it's what brought me home.